The Atlanta Hawks are ready to make some changes, GP. The Hawks fired head coach Nate McMillan yesterday. McMillan spent the last 3 seasons at the helm in Atlanta after taking over for Lloyd Pierce in 2021. He led the Hawks on a surprising run to the Eastern Conference Finals that season, but since then, Atlanta has been unable to compete with the top teams in the East. They currently sit 8th in the East and just a game below 500. So, there's a lot to sort through here, but how do we get to this point?
Well, it's been headed this direction for a while, probably about a month, because as you noted, this team has been underachieving relative to expectations and relative to the talent on the roster. Nate McMillan got off to a great start in Atlanta, went to the Eastern Conference Finals, but since then it's been not nearly as good. Locked into 8th right now in the East. That puts you in the play-in. And when you combine that with the idea, at least, that he didn't have a great relationship with Trae Young, well, the history of the NBA tells us when the coach and the star player are butting heads or at least not on the same page, it is almost always the coach that gets moved, not the star player. So that's how we get to this place, and now we get to see what Atlanta does next and to see whether this change can spark them into playing better basketball the rest of this regular season.
What names make sense, in your opinion, for this job when you factor in, as you mentioned, the relationship that needs to be strengthened with their star?
Well, the biggest name connected to the job reportedly is Quinn Snyder, who, of course, has been out of the NBA since resigning of head coach of the Utah Jazz. He was terrific in Salt Lake City. He led the Jazz to the playoffs in 6 consecutive years, went to the conference semifinals multiple times. He's well respected within the industry as a terrific basketball mind and a great basketball coach. So if Atlanta can make him the next full-time head coach of that Hawks franchise, it makes a lot of sense to me. He has the type of credibility where he could stand up to a star player or two if they started to question or maybe not be on the same page. Again, he's really well respected, and more than anything right now, it looks like that Atlanta franchise needs somebody like that. Maybe not Quinn, but somebody who's got credibility to be in charge of that coaching staff.
And when you look at the East, the landscape, you've got Milwaukee, Boston, obviously, Philadelphia. There's a lot of talent in the East. This roster has a lot of talent. So is it simple to say that if you get the right guy in that position with this roster, that this is a team that could compete for that Eastern Conference championship?
Theoretically, maybe, but the bigger question here is, who is Trae Young? Like, is he a guy who's an unbelievable talent and can go get a lot of points and make shots from all over the court, but you can't quite win at the highest level with him consistently? Is he a great teammate? Is he a great leader? I can't speak to that definitively because I'm not in that locker room, but there's certainly some thoughts that maybe he doesn't check some of those boxes that you would like the face of your franchise to check. So the talent is in place. One of the reasons Nate McMillan is no longer the coach in Atlanta is because he wasn't reaching expectations based on the talent within the franchise. But like you said, there's some really high-level teams in the Eastern Conference, and for Atlanta to try to battle with them to go to an Eastern Conference Finals or something like that, it is probably unlikely, but not impossible.
Last night, there were a ton of great matchups, and we'll start with Kansas State's win over Baylor. You kind of had this one, Gary. You had a lot of them last night, but what stood out in this game specifically?
Well, these are two really good basketball teams that are both projected to be top 4 seeds in the NCAA tournament. It speaks to the quality of the Big 12.
It's loaded. It's really unbelievable.
Well, how about this? Again, these are two projected top 4 seeds, and neither one of them is really seriously competing for the Big 12 title right now. That's probably going to come down to Kansas and Texas. Keontae Johnson and Marquise Noel, it's been one of the best duos in the entire country, not just the Big 12, all season. And I can't say enough about the job Jerome Tang has done. He was a 20-year assistant for Scott Drew at Baylor, takes over the Kansas State program, literally picked last by everybody who picks things in the Big 12. And they're not going to finish first, but they are tied for 3rd right now. They're going to comfortably make the NCAA tournament, and it's why Jerome Tang, after, by the way, getting a regular season sweep over his old boss and forever friend, Scott Drew. It's why Jerome Tang is a legitimate candidate for National Coach of the Year.
Yeah, and that scene in Manhattan, Kansas, was pretty lit yesterday. Texas A&M takes down Tennessee, and this is a huge boost to the resume of the Aggies.
Boy, if you haven't been paying attention to what Buzz Williams is doing, you have been missing one of the best stories in college basketball, because A&M, I had them ranked in the preseason. Most people did not. And it looked like I was going to be on the wrong side of that for a while, because they started 6-5 in their first 11 games. They lost to Wofford, to Murray State. Both of those teams are outside of the top 200 of the net. In that stretch, they were ranking in some computers like as the 90th best team in the country. Since then, since starting 6-5, they are 15-2. They're alone in second in the SEC standings, behind only Alabama. And in this stretch of 17 games, playing like a top 10 team in the country, according to the computers. So this is the biggest turnaround, in-season turnaround in the sport right now, and it's why Buzz Williams is about to do definitively what he had already done at Virginia Tech, which is take over a very difficult situation and then build it into something that can play in the NCAA tournament. They almost got there last season at A&M. Now it seems pretty clear they're going to get there this season.
How'd you not drop a Bart Torvik stat on us there?
I was about to, but I didn't want to confuse you again, so I just
tease that for later.
Broadly speaking, said computers.
In the Big East, Gary, Marquette defeated Creighton 73-71, and this kind of fits with the theme we're seeing there. I mean, Marquette was picked 9th, I think, in the Big East to start the season, and now they're a top 10 team in the nation, just knocked off another ranked group.
Yeah, Marquette is the Kansas State of the Big East. Shaka Smart in his second year in Milwaukee. They lost 3 of their top 4 scorers from last season's team, and you are right. They were picked 9th in the preseason Big East poll, and now you see where they're at, alone in first place. And when you look at the schedule going forward, only 3 regular season games left: against DePaul, then at Butler, then against St. John's at home. They're going to be significant favorites, Marquette is, over every one of those schools. Those schools are all ranked outside of the top 90 of the net. Marquette hasn't lost to a team ranked outside of the top 90 of the net all season long. Simply put, as long as Marquette can do what it's been doing all season, which is literally never lose to teams like that, they're going to win 3 more in a row and be your outright Big East champions, and that's going to make Shaka Smart, I would assume, the unanimous Big East Coach of the Year.
Wow. All right, well, finally, Michigan State pulled the upset over Indiana. And, Gary, this was an emotional win for the Spartans, for their fans, for that entire community.
Well, you saw Tom Izzo crying pregame, tears in his eyes postgame. This was a really special night in that community, inside that building. And I'm appreciative of the way Indiana participated in it as well. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Michigan State was going to coordinate what the crowd wore, what its staff wore. But Indiana, Mike Woodson and staff were literally wearing Spartan Strong shirts. Everybody connected to this game within the Big Ten understood how special and important of a night this was going to be, given that this was the first game back on campus since 3 students were senselessly and tragically murdered by a man with a gun. Tom Izzo had given a really nice speech to the campus community, in the days after, again, that tragic event. But to get back on the court and play for the first time, you could see the emotion literally on his face. And for them to come out and then perform on the basketball court, win the game by 15, it was a really special night. Tom Izzo talked about it afterward, how badly the entire community just needed something to help them heal. And there's basketball or any sport, it's never a magic wand. No. But it can be helpful, and it felt like last night was a helpful night.
We're back, and we're shining on basketball. The second half of the NBA season tips off tomorrow. We went through the top teams yesterday, according to our Gary Parrish. So now let's shift to your individual honors, GP. You're going to predict the season award winners. And let's start with the biggest one, MVP. Who you got?
It's going to be Nikola Jokic for the 3rd consecutive year. And that's not something I would have said maybe 2 months ago, because I do think voters were looking for anybody else, maybe Jason Tatum, Ja Morant, to vote MVP. But as we sit here on February 22nd, it is undeniable. Your vote's got to go to that guy. He's averaging a triple-double for the team with the best record in the Western Conference. He's got the best player efficiency rating in the entire NBA. So assuming he keeps that up and the Nuggets keep this up, he's going to win a 3rd straight MVP and become just the 4th person ever to do that in the NBA. The others are Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, and Larry Bird. Nikola Jokic is about to be in some really elite company.
Yeah, it's incredible. How about Defensive Player of the Year?
It's got to be Jaren Jackson Jr., the star, still young but impactful big for the Memphis Grizzlies. He has the second best defensive rating in the NBA. He's averaging 3.3 blocks per game, which ranks first in the NBA. He rim protects. He can guard in space. He's just a really unique talent. There's no denying that Ja Morant is the star of the Grizzlies. He's the face of the franchise. He's a big-time Nike endorser, one of the big faces of the league. But you can't overstate what Jaren Jackson Jr. mean to the Grizzlies' success. He changes them from a whatever defensive team to one of the best, if not the best defensive teams when he's on the court. Again, his ability to rim protect, block shots, alter shots, but also get out and switch everything in guarded space, really unique talent. These days, the term unicorn gets thrown around a lot. There's not many of them, but he actually is one.
So Rookie of the Year might be the most intriguing award this season because it looks like a two-man race at this point headed down the stretch.
Ultimately, I believe it's going to go to Paolo Banchero, who was the #1 pick in the 2022 NBA draft and always the favorite to be Rookie of the Year because he just had the body, the physical makeup to really seamlessly transition into that league. He is leading, all rookies in points per game. He's averaging 19.9 points. He's also getting 6.6 rebounds, 3.6 assists. Obviously not on one of the best teams in the NBA, but he's been undeniably special from day one. And if you're Orlando and you could do the draft over again, you wouldn't. You'd keep the guy you took.
What about most improved player this year?
That's probably Lauri Markkanen, who is on his third team right now, and just at the age of 25 in year 6, started in the 2023 All-Star game. There's not a person on the planet that you could have told 2 years ago, yeah, Lauri Markkanen's going to start in an NBA All-Star game one day, and they would have said, oh, sure, I could envision that. He has jumped in points per game by nearly 10 points from last year to this year. He's become a well-rounded, reliable threat from three-point range, shooting above 40% from the perimeter. Just a really, really special talent that I think it was always obvious to see. Like, the potential was there, but it took a little while to get to this point, but he's here now, and he's great.
Yeah, it speaks to system and coaching. So to that point, Coach of the Year in 22-23 season is who?
I think it's Joe Mazzulla, the now permanent head coach of the Boston Celtics.
I think about where this started, too.
Yeah, his boss loses his job, and Joe gets it on an interim basis. And then it was like, well, let's see how it goes. He's only 34 years old. He had no NBA head coaching experience, and right now he's got the best record in the Eastern Conference at 42-17. He has done a tremendous job, and I know there might be somebody out there saying, hey, the Celtics were in the finals last season. They got Jason Tatum. Anybody could coach that team. That's just simply not true. I think a lot of people could be successful, but to take over this franchise
under those circumstances,
it's a lot of pressure. It's basically somebody saying, hey, here's a job, but you better be better at it than everybody else in the NBA or you won't get to keep it. And so far, he has met that standard. He's been terrific, and it's among the reasons the Celtics are legitimate championship contenders. Jason Tatum's the biggest reason, but Joe Mazzulla is a part of it, no question.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell for more videos.